Just like you got a palate for food and all the flavors in food, there's a lot of flavors and emotions. And are you ready to develop that palate? I hope so, because we about to get into it. I'm about to give you the tools, and you're about to be the emotional man. Everybody is going to want to be around you. Everybody is going to trust you. Everybody is going to feel calm around you. People are going to brag about being able to spend time with you. You will leave an invaluable impression and mark on other people. You're going to change the world. You're going to change the world, man. You're going to change yourself, and in turn, it's going to change the world. Are y'all ready? All right, let's get into these tools. Hey, you feel that?
You are now tuned into You Feel That with Bryce the Third.
Yo, and welcome to another episode of You Feel That with Bryce the Third, the premier podcast for those looking to grow, exceed, and excel in the world as somebody who deals with big emotions, somebody who considers themselves to be a highly sensitive person. If you deal with emotions at all, this is the podcast for you, and this is a space for us. I am, of course, your host, Bryce the Third, mental and emotional wellness mentor, recording artist, and after the night, event host. As you're watching this and listening to this, I would have done this event that I'm doing tonight in Lansing, and it's going to be pretty sweet. My homegirl Mila Lynn and my homeboy Tori Gray are doing an event in Lansing, and I'm going to be the host with the most. It'll be sweet. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to getting outside the crib after having COVID for real. I'm also not gonna lie, I'm pretty damn excited about today's episode. It's been a long time coming, and it's really part of my personal brand and my personal message from day one, really, to destigmatize this. And that is being an emotional man. A lot of times men struggle with embracing their emotions. I know I did for a long time. I know I tried to suppress it for a long time because I didn't think it was cool. And the feedback that I would get from the world was that this is not really necessarily welcomed here. And I just want to destigmatize that. I want to lead my men on the path of being able to embrace their emotions, becoming an overall emotionally intelligent human being, and at the very least maybe sparking that thing within somebody that lets them know that they can embrace their emotions. Because let me tell you, like, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a father, as a creative, as a artist, as a content creator, being in tune with my emotions serves me and those that I serve. It helps take me to the next level of environmental comprehension. Like, I fit into a room a little bit different because I move attuned to my emotions. And it's not necessarily something that we're born with. I think it's something we have to cultivate, and in practice, we can learn how to take advantage of our emotional capabilities. And that's what today's episode is going to be about. Being a man and being emotional. But before we get deep into it, let's have a word from our sponsors. Me. So before we get into it, this episode is brought to you by my Patreon, Bryce the Third. Look at this. Ooh, Bryce the Third. Ooh. I get it. You're mad emotional. There's not really a supportive place to be yourself, your emotional self. You want to learn how to harness these emotions and use them for good. You no longer want to be debilitated by these heavy emotions, but you want to be empowered by the ways that you feel deeply. You want to dig into more tools, more resources, and overall just take your life to the next level. Well, let me tell you, my friend, you are doing yourself a service by even listening to this podcast, because you are exactly who I made this podcast for. And if you want to help take this podcast to the next level, because I'm always growing and I'd rather grow with friends, hop on over to my Patreon. There's 3 tiers that you could pledge a monthly subscription to. Tier 1 is to show us some monthly love and help us take this thing to the next level perpetually. With Tier 2, you get access to a weekly text group that, trust me, you want to be a part of. With weekly motivation, reminders to give yourself compassion at just the right time, and updates on the newest products before anybody else gets their hands on them. And in Tier 3, not only do you get access to the Tier 2 text group, but you get a special shout out at the end of every episode of You Feel That. So basically, you become a damn celebrity. However you decide to show up is greatly appreciated, and I'm aiming to give you 3 times the value of whatever it is that you put in. Because you know the universe helps those who helps themselves. You can find a link to the Patreon page in the show description of whatever you're listening to your podcast on. And if you're on YouTube, it's down there in the description. Now let's get to the show. All right, so to get it jumped off, I want to talk a little bit about my own personal story, my own personal experience. As far back as I can remember, I've always been emotional. I've always felt things in a big way. Like, so much so I would feel out of place. Like, I would look around at my peers as a kid and be like, you feel that? I mean, hence the name of this podcast. It's just like, I felt that I was out of place. Like, I felt that I felt way more than other people were putting on that they were feeling. And I felt like maybe I was an outcast, or maybe I was weird, especially as a man, as a boy. Like, we weren't supposed to feel these things that I was feeling because I just wasn't pushed in the culture. Like you're a boy, you got to boss up, you got to play with frauds, you got to get dirty, you got to fight, you got to be, stoic. And that was communicated to me very early on. Some of my earliest memories is fear, anxiety, big love, like the feeling that I felt about my mom. Like, I still am a mama's boy, where it was like I really appreciated having somebody in my corner like she was. But the fear behind behind that because it was always like, damn, like, I feel so strongly about this thing. What happens if I lose it? So like the fear and anxiety. And this was like as a 7-year-old, 8-year-old kid. My grandmother, who I was really close with, my granny, she had passed away. And, you know, if I could remember right, I went to like some type of anger management or some type of like emotional cultivation, something or another, where like I was punching bags and we had like a break, like you know how you got those vases where you could break them in a room now. Like it was something like that, but for kids. Like I've always had to have support for my emotions. And eventually my support became to suppress it. If I just pretended to be like everybody else, maybe I wouldn't have to ask anybody else, do you feel that? Maybe I could just be okay and fit in. So I began to suppress because it wasn't cool to embrace my emotions. I act as if things didn't faze me. I began to get blowed. I began to smoke weed. I remember the first time that I smoked for real. Like I had tried a couple of times, but the first time I really did it, I got into a fight. We went to this carnival and I had dressed in all white. I had the white Dickie shorts on. I had a white tee on. I had the white fitted cap with the D on it, and it had like the tiger coming out the D. It was crazy. I had this crazy fit on, and we got to the carnival and we ended up getting into a fight, and I got my whole outfit dirty. So somebody had previously offered for me to come smoke weed with them, and because I got my shit dirty and I was mad and I was frustrated and I was anxious about it and I was just tense, like I'm like, I need something outside of myself to deal with these emotions because I don't know what else to do. So I took that person up on the weed and I smoked, and it was like my troubles kind of went away. And that was kind of like my first experience with numbing my emotions. Actually, no, it wasn't. I used to go to the dentist. This is crazy. And I didn't even know, like I just always felt like trying to get outside of myself and feel good when I didn't necessarily feel good. But I used to go to the dentist and they used to give me this laughing gas, and I used to let them give it to me, and I used to tell them like, I'm not feeling anything. I'd be blowed as hell. Like I'm a kid. I'd be blowed as hell. And I'd be telling them like, I don't feel anything yet. Turn it up a little bit. And then I would just get zooted. And it would take my mind off of the stress that I would have at school with not fitting in, feeling the ways that I was starting to feel about girls and being a nerd and not fitting into certain circles. Like I would look forward to a dentist trip. I'm not gonna hold you. So I learned very early on that things outside of myself can help take my mind off of how I was that I felt inside of myself. Was it a coping mechanism? Hell yeah. And if you think about it, they talking 12-step that this is a genetic addiction, and alcoholism is a genetic disease. I don't know, maybe it's in my genetic makeup to seek something externally to make me feel better. Who fucking knows? All I know is that this is the route that I took. Now on the being a man side of the spectrum, I didn't necessarily have like the best male role model. My sister daddy, I think we talked about it on here before, like he wasn't the best male role model. My daddy, regardless of who fault it was or not, just wasn't really around like that. So I really ended up just going to the street and putting together like a amalgamation of like a male role model through all of the men that I would meet in the neighborhood. And when I say man, I'm talking like maybe as old as 30 when I'm 15. Now, let me tell you, none of these men had men in their lives. So they just moving around doing what it is that they doing, how they know how to do it. Everybody getting blowed, everybody drinking, smoking, having sex, doing bad shit. And that was my reference point. So I took that I saw, used that as a reference point, and also made up my own rules as to what it is to be a man. And I just saw that people were insensitive. Like in order to be a man, in order to be a strong man and somebody look up to, like you have to be insensitive. Things aren't supposed to affect you in any way. I remember very early on as a kid, you feel a way about a girl and then find out she messing with a dude somewhere else in the neighborhood. And it's like, instead of cry about it, my default energy was just to get angry, just to get mad, just to suppress, maybe try to go and do the same thing to that girl as if retribution was the answer and was going to make me feel better. When we got angry, we fought. There's a lot of fights that I'm not proud of, and things that I did where we were just reckless, and I was looking for an outlet, but I didn't necessarily have any guidance as to like how to let these emotions out. I mean, and even speaking on that, like treating women as objects and reactive. If someone disrespected you, you had to react. Like you had to, if somebody called you this or said something about your mom or did these things, like you have to do something. Like that's the way we move. And really, like it was a point of pride to not give a fuck. Like it was just a point of pride. Like the person who gave the least amount of fucks was the best man and made the best man win, for real. This was my reference point. So even though I was feeling the ways that I was feeling on the inside, like I felt like an emotional marshmallow. Like I felt super sensitive. Like I was doing my best to run as far away from how I was that I really felt on the inside as I could. And to put this external kind of shell outside to make sure that everybody knew that I wasn't for no games. And this in turn didn't really help me to build a relationship with my intuition. You know, I was damn near oblivious to the subtleties of energy. There was this one instance where there were some girls fighting down the street, and me and my guy, we just walked over there because we wanted to see the fight. So the fight hadn't happened yet, and like it was kind of stalled out because, you know, wasn't nobody, everybody was afraid to knock on the girl's door that the other girls that came to see. So I went and knocked on the door. And in hindsight now in life, like I definitely can tell that this probably wasn't the best thing for me to do. I really just wanted to see the fight, and it was taking too long to get started. So I knocked on the door like, hey, I don't know what's going on out here, but you know, there's some girls out here, they trying to see y'all or whatever. And like even saying these words now, like I should have just sat my ass down somewhere. But so, you know, I did that, and then the fight pursued, and girls fight dirty. They got locks and rocks is thrown and all crazy stuff. And then after that, me and my dog, we dipped and we went back to my block. And on the way back to my block, there was a car that had pulled up. It was like, hey, y'all know something that happened at my grandma's house? I'm like, nah, I don't know what's going on. The guy I was with, he was like, oh, bro, they gonna come back. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't, what would they come back for? Like, I don't know nothing about nobody grandma crib. So we get to the crib, my crib, and we sitting there for a little bit. And then that red van pulls back up, and they like, this what happened when you go and mess with somebody at my grandma's house, whoop whoop. And like 6 or 7 people hop out the truck, and you know, they starting to square up. It's me and my dog. It's just me and my dog. Oh, and my young dog. So it's 3 of us. It's like 7 grown men hopping out this trunk. So, you know, we're surrounded, and now we got to fight. We don't know what's going on, but yeah, I'm not about to get my ass beat. So I square up. My mom is walking down the street. She see what's going on, and so I'm fighting in the middle of this circle, and next thing I know, I hear, watch your left, watch your right. I look behind me, my mom in the middle of this circle fighting with me. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? So like, you know, I'm like, hey man, you know, like I'm worried about my mom. I'm trying to get my mom out of the middle of this. And what ended up happening was nobody really necessarily got hurt except for my young dog. They knocked my young dog out. He ain't even had nothing to do with it. He wasn't at the house that we was at when we knocked on the door, and they knocked him out and thought they did something, hopped in the truck and sped off. But this was like my first experience with my intuition. I was completely oblivious to the fact that what I did was related to what had happened. And then it took for me to have this experience where it's like, oh, what you do intuitively has feedback in the world. And that was a day that actually caused me to grow up, because it's like it could have went a lot worse. Like one of them people could have hit my mom. Like it just could have just went a lot worse than it did. I'm glad that it went the way that it did. And you know, it's a story that me and my mom tell, because it kind of is telling of our relationship. Like we was in the middle of the street fighting with each other, and that is no cap. But it's just like I was out of tune with my intuition, because like I would negate the importance of my emotions. I didn't have a relationship with my intuition. And so some of this was being naive and young and not having the experience, but also a lot of this was suppressing my emotions and not feeling what's right and what's not. Because in that moment, like like now I know, like I'm not about to knock on nobody's door for anything, because it doesn't feel right. But when we don't have a relationship with our emotions, we don't know what feels right or what feels wrong. And it can become this thing where, you know, we're kind of in limbo and we don't know what the next decision to make is, and we just don't trust ourselves. And, you know, so, but that's my personal experience. That's kind of where it is that I come from when it comes to emotions. And, you know, I want to give you some background as if you've tapped into anything that I've created. Like a lot of my stuff is super, super, super based in emotions and emotional intelligence and being in tune with our intuition. And I just wanted to put all this on the floor to let you know, like, I don't come from that. Like, I don't come from that. A lot of the stuff that you see right now was counterintuitive at one point. So I just want to put that on the floor, because it's like, if you've never began a relationship with your emotions, even if you are, you know, even if you're up there in age, even if you're 80, like you still have the ability to today, like, because it's a practice, tap into your emotions and really begin a relationship with yourself. Let's talk a little bit about the benefits of being attuned emotionally. And having been on both sides of the fence, I gotta tell you, it's way better over here. Some of the personal benefits that I personally experienced is a better, more intimate relationship with myself. In relation to life in general, life just hit different when you fuck with you. Life just hit different when you have a better relationship with yourself. Life just hit different when you feel completely expressed. And being attuned emotionally allows for me to cultivate a relationship with life that allows for these things to all be present and prevalent in my life. Like this leads to a better relationship with my surroundings, a better relationship with the relationships that I have in my life. I'm a father of two, been a dad since I was 15, and I can't tell you how above and beyond I feel that parenting is for me because I'm attuned emotionally and I'm not running away from the ways that I feel. And then I think about like how my kids can benefit too. My daughter reminds me a lot of myself in a lot of different ways. Some ways kind of fucking scary. But to be able to have a dad who's in tune with his emotions that allows her to process and develop a relationship with her emotions very early on, like that's invaluable. That's an invaluable advantage to have as a kid. And my son as well. My son is emotionally intelligent, nothing like I was at his age. He's actually the age that I was when he was on his way. And just to see how he moved, I see how he has benefited from having somebody who is there to the capacity that I've been able to be there emotionally. And when we think about where it is that I've come from and some of the stories that I shared with you today in today's podcast, like shit, self-preservation is a benefit. I'm less likely to get killed for something I had something to do with. Now, I know a lot of you probably aren't even necessarily thinking along the lines of like, what can I get killed by? But where I come from, anger and unchecked emotion gets people killed. Where I used to stay at when I stayed in Inkster, I stayed off of Grandview. That was like Avondale in the Middle Belt. It's the hood. And I remember one time I pulled up in a van and it was this guy looking at me, just looking at me. And I was kind of looking back at him because I was, I don't know what I was. But I was looking back at him, and then like after a good 5-6 seconds of eye contact, he was like, "What are you looking at?" I'm like, oh shit. And I'm in recovery at this point, so I'm like, hey bro, you got it. Like, had it been another iteration of myself, like I might have been like, no, what the fuck is you looking at? And that's just like those instances end up in these moments where it's like unchecked trauma and emotional boil over ends up in people getting killed. And that's just a reality where I'm from. But now, because I'm in tune with myself emotionally, I am less likely to be killed by something I had something to do with. If you hear in the news that Bryce the Third was killed by another person, like it was a fluke, or bro was really, really tripping, or sis was really tripping, whoever decides to take me out if that happens. But I just know that it's less likely to be something that I had something to do with because I'm in tune with my environment. I'm in tune with what may possibly happen and the feedback that I can get from the things that I do and the actions that I take. And it's just less of a likelihood. Also, the relationships that I've been able to cultivate have been deep and aligned. Now, I won't tell you that deep connection is super abundant, but why would you want it to be? Just like music is notes and spaces. And that space between the notes is just as important as the note. And it adds to the overall piece of the music. So why would we just want deep relationship? Like, there's got to be some space that allows for us to cultivate an understanding of where it is that we are in the season of life that we're in right now. So I won't say like deep aligned relationships aren't like boom, 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 boom. But I will say the ones that are and have been part of my life have been in addition to my life unlike anything I've ever experienced. And that's because I have taken it upon myself to attune myself emotionally in my life. And so what ends up happening is we attract what we are. So when we are away, like that is the magnet that attracts that way to us. So if I've done all this work to be in tune with myself emotionally, if I've done all this work to make sure that I give in an emotionally informed manner, like that's what's going to come back. That's what's going to come back. So my friend, I was sitting with her the other day and we were eating lunch. And she was telling me the story of how she met her boyfriend and how she was on these dating apps and how before she went to every date, like it would always be some anxiety as to like, oh, I gotta look this way or I gotta be this way or these things have to happen or it has to happen in a specific way. And she had a lot of experience where it was like it wasn't the best and then kind of some sucky experiences. But then when she met her boyfriend and they met for the first time, when she met, like she didn't have any of that anxiety. Like the energy that he gave off was that of calm and peace and just a settled energy. And I appreciated her sharing this part of her story. And it also reminded me, like in order to be able to be somebody who gives off that energy, we got to do this work. And doing this work allows for us to be that person that when people meet up with us, we give off that energy. But on the flip side, we also attract that energy. And we know what that energy looks like, smells like, tastes like. So therefore, anything that's not that energy is not necessarily anything that we would entertain. And anything that is that energy is immediately recognizable and something that we would allow in our space. Therefore, we tend to end up cultivating deeper and more aligned relationships. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful experiences. Some overall benefits of being emotionally in tune: you're careful, insightful, intuitive, empathetic. Shit, high key sexy too, whether they want to tell you or not. Also, if somebody doesn't find this attractive, that gives you a hint as to how toxic a person may be. So now you've developed an alarm system that allows for you to avoid toxic relationships. Like I said before too, these traits will serve you in business, creativity, relationships, and just overall designing the life that you desire. So what do you say? Shall we dig in, man? Shall we dig in, man? How can we be better emotionally in tune? Are you ready to tap into the superpower that your emotions are? Men, I'm talking to you, men. Are you ready to quit suppressing our emotions? Are you ready to quit confusing all of our emotions for just anger and frustration? Are you ready to generate a palette? Just like you got a palette for food and all the flavors in food, there's a lot of flavors and emotions. And are you ready to develop that palette? I hope so, because we about to get into it. I'm about to give you the tools, and you're about to be the emotional man. Everybody is going to want to be around you. Everybody is going to trust you. Everybody is going to feel calm around you. People are going to brag about being able to spend time with you. You will leave an invaluable impression and mark on other people. You're going to change the world. You're going to change the world, man. You're going to change yourself, and in turn, it's going to change the world. Are y'all ready? All right, let's get into these tools. Now, look, do I have some specific tools? Yeah, I do. Things I've been able to apply to my own life to become more attuned to my emotional states. But there's also states of mind. There's also spiritual states. And we can't necessarily even have a conversation before we learn to speak the language. So thinking that in some cases, men may lack the training or support to make sense of their feelings and instead may bury them deeper. If we don't got the support, if we don't have the outlets, if we've never had this conversation that allows for us to be free and open about our emotions, of course, I'm gonna stuff that shit down. I'm not gonna talk about it. But the thing that happens when we stuff things down is what happens when you have a trunk full of clothes, or what happens when you have like a drawer full of shit, right? You stuff it in there and then eventually it comes out. It leaks out somehow, some way. And a lot of times that's what happened with us as men. You got these little instances where things will pop out and it's like, damn, like where did that even come from? Men tend to convert one feeling into another. Men may convert stereotypically feminine feelings such as sadness or vulnerability into feelings like anger or pride. Feelings more socially acceptable for them to experience. It's way more accepted as a man for me to say, oh, I'm pissed off, than it is for me to say, hey, man, like, I'm sad. Like, we, and when I say we, I mean me, come from a cultural belief set where it's way more acceptable for me to say, I'm pissed off, and for me to be pissed off than it is for me to be sad and to tell you that I've cried or to tell you that I feel like shedding a tear. From where I come from, it's felt more socially acceptable to want to beat somebody's ass and tell everybody that that's what I'm finna do than it does that I want to cry because I got my heart broke, or that I'm just not feeling good today and I just feel like crying for no reason. As a matter of fact, I'm going to right now. That ain't some shit that you would tell your friend. That ain't some shit that I would tell my friend back then. I remember one instance, I was sitting on the porch with a guy that I used to kick it with, and I was going through some shit with a woman, and you know, I really started crying on the porch. And I remember the feeling of like not being supported, or like I need to kind of like put these tears up because bro, it's like really like it's not that deep, it's not that serious, like brush your life up and man up. And that was a very pivotal point in my life where it was like, you know what, I'm not gonna show my tears at all then. I was relatively young, and this is what established my way and reasoning for the way that I move. And it was a long time after that before, you know, I shared with another man or cried in front of another man in that capacity. Now, this one's important for all humans. A lot of people believe that it's only healthy to have positive emotions such as happiness, joy, and contentment, but that negative emotions like fear, anxiety, or sadness are inappropriate. We need to dispel this myth if we're going to get in touch with our feelings. Anger, for example, is not inherently negative. It can show us that we have an unfulfilled need or a frustration with crossed boundaries. A person that feels angry should examine where the anger is coming from so he or she can resolve the issue. Anger becomes a problem only when it is exhibited unchecked, hurting us and those around us. And this reading echoes the sentiment of which I show up to this podcast and talk to y'all about all the time. Like, our emotions are there to serve us. Everything we feel and everything we experience is part of the whole of the lesson that life is, including our emotions, especially our emotions. Because, and I will never not share this analogy, if we touch a stove and it burns our hand, we can learn to not touch the stove again from the pain that we felt from touching the stove. Touching the stove and feeling that burn is our alarm system to pivot for our wellness. Anger is not inherently bad. Depression is not inherently bad. Sadness is not inherently bad. There are no bads and goods. It's what we do with them. And learning to be emotionally attuned as men is learning to take this awareness to the next level and really use our emotions in a way that empower us and not be debilitated by our experience with these emotions. It's really like a sixth sense. It allows for us to move in a way that our antenna picks up an extra signal. Not only do we get to know who we are and get to sort through our own emotional experience, but we also have an antenna for how other people may be feeling. And this could serve us in business and in cultivating meaningful relationships and just being a good person to somebody else. So these are just a couple of ways that culture may lead us to not even having this conversation. Or there may be people that saw the title of this podcast episode and be like, I ain't listening to that shit. The emotional man, I ain't soft. What the fuck? I don't want to get to know my emotions. It's scary in there. I done seen a lot and I know I got a lot to deal with and I'm not ready for that. I'm going to put that off to tomorrow. Tomorrow always going to be tomorrow. Trust that. Now is the time. Now is the time. There's nothing but benefits to digging into our emotional capacity and cultivating an enhanced capacity. So let's talk solution. And when I'm talking solution, I'm not saying that, oh, this will solve all of your problems, but I am saying that practicing some of these things that I'm going to suggest in a moment will allow for you to begin a relationship with yourself that is investigative of these emotions. And when we begin to ask questions about ourselves and our experience, we have an enhanced experience. This journey is a journey of a million steps. This journey will never end. There will always be another circumstance that arouses another emotion within you that maybe you didn't have experience with before this. But such is the beauty of life. Having these experiences gives us zest, and showing up for these experiences and not running away from the potential wisdom that we can cultivate from getting through these experiences is what allows for us to be a chef of that zest. We now become a part of the process versus a victim of the process. We now have a hand in seasoning the gumbo that is life. We walk hand in hand with the spirit of the universe when we tap in like this. So some of these things may speak to you more than other things. Take what you gravitate towards and just start there. There's no right way to begin a relationship with yourself in this manner. Just fucking show up. And when you show up, more will be shown, and then you can show up some more. Let's start with naming the emotions, learning to identify them correctly. So as we talked about earlier, men may convert one feeling into another, such as taking sadness and vulnerability and turning into anger and pride. So naming the emotions, learning to identify them correctly is a good way to begin a relationship with the now and the experience, our specific experience with these sensations. So often we think of the easy ones such as anger, happiness, sadness, fear, but as we become more experienced, our emotions become more nuanced. We'll continue to have experiences where things will happen in such a order that it's like, I don't even know how the fuck to feel right now. And then it will take for us to be able to dig into that feeling and decipher, what is this feeling? What combination of feelings make up this feeling? What does this feeling mean for me? Just as pain means I need to take my hand away from this stove, what does this feeling that I feel mean for me? What does it closely resemble? I know for me, love was a big one, especially after a big breakup that I had a few years ago, where love used to mean this, that I felt these things, that I followed that feeling, and that this feeling of feeling good was love. But I had come to learn in having to distance myself from somebody that I love that, oh, this doesn't necessarily feel good. So love took on a whole new meaning. Like, oh, love really means for me to allow for things to be what they are, even if they don't necessarily feel good for me, because of how much I want people to be expressed, how okay I want to be with whatever life presents to me to be. So sometimes love fucking sucked. Like, love is the action, like that can fucking suck. Like love as an action for me can be humbling. Sometimes I have to practice love over ego. Sometimes I have to practice love over pride. And that's been a research experiment in my life and in my spirit for the past 3.5 years. And it's felt all type of ways. It's sucked to get to a point to where, oh, this is the best feeling I've ever felt. The feeling of freedom, the feeling of allowing freedom for everybody. The feeling of not having to control. The feeling of knowing that somebody else knows that I am here in support of whatever it is that you seek to do. It's been a crash course on love. Y'all ready for that episode 2 of love? We'll get there. We'll get there. But yeah, so just learning like through the process to name and identify our emotions. Like learn to identify less commonly named ones as well. Like shock, shame, anxiety, disgust, boredom, amusement, desperation, doubt. Like all of these things are what we'll have a chance to come up against and find like, oh, this is that, or this is that, or this feels like this. You know, somebody like me, like, doing a lot of work with a counselor of mine, I gave my shit colors, like, oh, this is dark purple and it feels like I swallowed a hot ball of iron. It feels like grief, anger, sadness, jealousy, fear. Just sitting and identifying these emotions and coming to an understanding of what these things look like. Picking the emotions out of a lineup. It was that motherfucker. Snitching on your emotions. I don't condone snitching. Also, we may be used to certain associations like angry equals yelling. Like I'm yelling because I'm angry. But learning to dig below the surface might reveal that I'm yelling because I'm hurt or scared. So learning what are some of my knee-jerk reactions to these ways that I feel, and what does that mean? And what does it mean for the people around me? And what do I desire to be and contribute to the people around me and the environments around me and the places around me? What happens if I yell, as a black man, if I yell in a fucking Starbucks and I'm mad, like the police gonna get caught on me? I mean, it might be for any man, but I only know what it's like to be a black man. So there's certain things that I've learned, like even though I feel these ways, we can't act out on this right now because this is not the best place or circumstance to act out on it. As a matter of fact, like let me do the work to dissect it a bit so that maybe acting out on it isn't a necessity. How can I take this thing that I feel and use it to best serve me and those around me? Especially if I have a desired goal of being empathetic, being compassionate, being understanding. This emotion is a trigger to discover what it is that I can do with it. But first, I got to kind of dig in and look, especially if I've never looked before, to see what automatic process exists. What do I usually do when I feel this thing? And if I'm usually yelling when I feel this, is this anger or is it something else? Learning to name the emotions and identify them correctly is definitely going to serve you. And here we go. You know what's coming. Journaling definitely helps with this. The number one technique for getting to know my emotions better has been to journal. There's been so many fucking times where I've had an experience and it's like, and I just feel away and I just want to, and I may want to call somebody and maybe there's not necessarily somebody there for me to call, or maybe I want to like say things out loud, but there's nobody necessarily to say these things to. My good old guy, the journal, I whip that baby out and I get to writing down and scribbling. Sometimes I scribble so much it look like chicken scratch. I'm about to set the page on fire. Like, I can't believe I'm going through this and she did this and he said this and but like when I see it on paper, like when it's outside of my head, when it's outside of my heart and I can see it in front of my face, it's like, oh, well, maybe that is this. And oh, well, damn, there's a pattern between my last journal entry and this journal entry. Or damn, like when I feel these ways, I have a tendency to do this. Like, but how's this serving me? Well, damn, I say I want this, but I keep on getting to this point to where this is the case. Like it allows me to look in its face. It allows me to see these things in real time, like what's going on. And I get a lot of epiphanies from journaling. So much so like it becomes like a perpetual process. So now I think in epiphanies, like before I even journal, like I'll think like I'll see the patterns like in my thought process or my feeling process because I'm so used to writing them down. And then I'll go to the journal and I'll write down the pattern that I found and that I want to break because like this isn't something that I desire. It doesn't align with what it is that I've set out to do or I've set out to create my life to be. Journaling. I gotta come out with a journal. Would y'all buy a journal if I came out with a you feel that journal? That's definitely an idea. I like that. Next, if you look at the disclaimer in every show note in this podcast, You Feel That with Bryce the Third, you will see that this is not a substitution for professional help. Seek counseling to help you get started on this journey. Seek counseling. I've had many counselors, and it's crazy. Like some people think going to counseling is a sign of weakness, especially men, where it's like, I'm going to counseling, but I won't tell anybody. Or if a man tells me that he went to a therapist or went to go get professional counseling, like he'll do it on the low, like he won't like tell me in front of everybody. And it's like, I want to tell, it's almost like he's telling me a secret. And then I tell him a secret back, like, hey man, I've gone to counseling too. It's okay. It's all right. Go seek professional help. To think about the difference between me and a counselor, the difference between a peer and a counselor. Like I share my personal experience, but counseling has allowed for people who have been professionally trained to use acceptance and commitment therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, all these different processes to help you to identify emotions as well as ask you provocative questions that kind of get your spirit going, your mind going. Use techniques to stimulate change within your life. Counseling is just like, counseling is cool as hell. It's cool as hell. And And the thing about it too is, so there's a couple of things. Like we'll go seek counseling, but we'll go and clam up and won't talk as much. Like when you go to see a counselor, be honest and willing. Like and sometimes willingness is all we need. And most times willingness is uncomfortable. When we stretch our container, our willingness, like it's uncomfortable because we're stretching who it is that we are. We're stretching what it is that we've done thus far in life. We're becoming a bigger version of ourselves. But when you grow, like it fucking hurts. Like if you think back to high school or whenever, you were having those growth spurts, like your bones would hurt. You would wake up and it's like, damn, like I'm hurting. Like for what? I ain't even do nothing. It hurts to grow, but it's worth it. Like it's worth it. It's worth it. It allows for us to grow in strength, in understanding, and in capacity. So be honest and willing. And a good way to be aware of how honest you are is if it sucks, you're probably being the exact amount of honest that you need to be. Also, like if one counselor sucks, like that's okay. Try again. And, it's just like dating or like talking to new people. Some people you're gonna kick it with and you really gonna vibe. Other people not so much. And I think we could put like counselors on these pedestals, or like one person stands as a representation of the whole profession that will come into contact with a counselor that we don't like and then use that as an excuse, like, oh yeah, I went to therapy, I don't like it, therapy ain't for me. It's like, well, maybe it was just the relationship with the therapist that you came across. Maybe that wasn't the therapist for you or the counselor for you. Try again. Court therapists, court counselors, until you find one that really vibes with you. And what's crazy is, like, for me, I've had multiple counselors that have vibed with me in multiple seasons of my life. So I've had counselors that I didn't vibe with. Like I had a counselor, like when I got straight out of rehab, that it was just, I just wasn't on the level that she was used to. She's probably used to people that are like on the verge of relapsing and trying not to use. And I had my nose was wide open. I was ready for the world. I'm trying to figure out a process that I could put in the place of the substances that I used to use. So it just didn't really work out. But I've had counselors dealing in relationship. I've had counselors dealing in relationship with myself. And I've had counselors that have dealt with metaphysics. I've had counselors that's dealt with process, and each one was just perfect for the season of my life. And it might not work if I was to go back to them right now, or I might not need that counselor in this season of my life. But it's like, continue to experiment. This is a tool that you can use, and this allows for us to not have to do it by ourselves. So I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna search for different resources that I could put, because I know there's like BetterHelp, and there's like a lot of different free resources that you could be able to take advantage of that allows for you to seek counseling, or at least begin to look through a list of counselors in your area that are available for you to go and kick it with and really like work through these things. Next on the list, learn to express emotions in healthy ways. I come from where people punch walls or worse to get their anger out. There was this guy, my play brother, we used to like really kick it. He actually lived with me for a little while, and this dude used to fucking like we went to the same school, and everybody knew like we was bros. So like one day I got called down to the office. I'm like, all right, because I used to be into some shit. So I'm like, oh, what they want? Nah. And I get down there, they're like, your brother done punched a wall and broke his hand. It's like bro, like, dude, did that solve anything? I got another friend too that be punching walls and fucked his finger up, and he's like a weightlifter. Like he does active stuff, so he couldn't do stuff for a minute because he broke his finger or like really hurt his finger. It's just like learning to find something to do with these emotions that aren't punching walls. And if you think about it, like think of the word emotion, energy in motion. This is exactly why I'm qualified to be able to sit down and talk to you all about dealing with our emotions, because I'm super energy. Like I'm all that. Like I have the sense to be able to feel out the energy in a room. I deal in energy work, and energy, one, can't be destroyed, and two, needs an outlet. And if there's so much energy pent up, built up within us, we need to do something with it. So hence why I can understand like why you would try to punch a wall, but a wall doesn't move. Your fucking bones will. So for me, creative expression was and is my outlet. Like writing music, creating content that gives me new perspective on my experience, really just getting off. Like that's how I get off. I know a lot of people in the sports. I know a lot of people in the fitness. Learning to do something with that energy. And I think like now looking at my show notes, it was important that I did these things in order, because when we learn to name our emotions and identify them, we can really learn where that energy is and figure out like how best to express these emotions. So other ways that people deal with emotions includes exercising, journaling, meditating, prayer, creating or listening to music, writing poetry, painting, journaling. Like, find out what helps you to process your emotions and be as creative as you want. And let me add that this may change. There may be things that you're called to as life continues to flow on that allows for a different way for you to exude your energy. But we have to begin this relationship with ourselves in order to be pointed in that direction. Now's the time. Got to do it now. Come on, let's get started. Pay attention to your body as well. Like, often we experience physical sensations that are associated with emotions, and we can learn to recognize our feelings based on our physical symptoms. This is big, especially for those who deal with like panic attacks. I dealt with big anxiety and can deal with big anxiety. What's interesting about this is a recent experience that I've had with my anxiety. So I've had a couple of experiences, including psychedelic experiences, that have pointed me in the direction of the source of my anxiety. And I'm just speaking on my personal experience. Like, a lot of the source of my anxiety is I can feel anxious when I'm not actively moving towards my desired reality. And this has multiple elements to it. It's the element of the movement and the element of the desire. The desire being a thing that can continually evolve, shape, and change and mold. And the movement could be a thing that if I'm not directly in tune with the direction that I'm going in that ever-changing process, can be paralyzed. So nothing's worse for my anxiety than not doing shit and not knowing where I'm going. I will be an anxious ass. Let me tell you. And there's been certain therapies and certain investigations that have pointed me to this specific journey that I'm on. But I'll tell you, my anxiety has a very physical manifestation. Like, I feel like I'm filled to the brim with like just fucking energy. And like, I need to scream. I need to get it out, but I don't know how to get it out. I can feel like I want to run from myself, but everywhere I go, there I am. I can feel like nobody understands and nobody gets what it is that I need. I can feel like there is no relief and there is no way out. This is what it physically feels like. I can feel tingles in my body, in my face, and just rushes and waves of anxiety all throughout my body. It can feel like I can't breathe. It can feel like a heart attack. It can feel like I'm going to die right now. And then the anxiety that pops up on top of that is, if I die right now, like, I'm not even doing what it is that I want to do. Like, I won't even die in pursuit of what it is I'm trying to create. And then more anxiety pops up. Safe to say, it's not fucking fun. Pay attention to your body. We can learn so much trying to recognize our feelings based on our physical symptoms. And this works on the flip side. Like, what does gratitude feel like? What does appreciation feel like? And I feel that in my gut. It feels like a rush, like almost like a roller coaster. And I can create that. Not necessarily. Well, let me say it's not necessarily creation, but it's tuning into it. See, energy and emotions are attuned to. We are attuning to the frequency of these energies. So for me, appreciation and gratitude is an energy that's always vibrating at all times. But it takes for me to intentionally tap into it. And when I do, I start to feel physical symptoms. It's almost like a grand wave of cosmic belonging. I get teary-eyed, I get welled up in my face. I feel it in my belly, my mind starts to feel light, and I start to think of every single thing that there is to be grateful for and appreciative of. And I'm carried and whisked away. Paying attention to our body allows for us to come into contact with this experience. And then we can use what we find to create our desired reality and learn how to cope with when some of the more undesired emotions show up. And to wrap this all up with a big, pretty emotionally capable man bow, this is a practice and a process. Nobody is responsible for your emotions but you. It is not anybody's fault that you feel the ways that you feel. Taking responsibility for this practice is about the most manly thing you can do, in my opinion. These are your emotions. And a lot of times, and there's a lot of different seasons of my life that I look back and I felt ways and I wanted people to feel the ways that I feel because it wasn't fair that I felt the ways that I felt, which was a losing game to begin with because you're not me and you'll never feel how I feel. So no matter how much I tried to make you feel how I felt, like, you wouldn't feel that way. You would feel the ways that you feel, but I would still feel the ways that I felt. So nobody was fucking winning. But learning to be emotionally responsible and not being reactive and not putting our emotions on the world as if it's the world's fault that we feel the ways that we feel, but taking responsibility for what we do with our emotions and how empowered we are around the ways that we feel. Oh man, you winning the game of life. You winning the game of life, my guy. And the beautiful thing about this is this reverberates through the universe. You're going to attract this same type of energy towards you, but only to the extent of which you create this energy in your life. Practice makes progress. There is no end. You can't win the game of emotions. Try. I dare you. They're going to beat your ass, boy. So don't even go into it thinking that this is something to win or something to conquer. This is a practice. And there will always be a time where we're caught off guard, like, oh shit, what the fuck is that feeling? Like, dang. Like, I ain't never came up across this. Like, let me sit down and let me pull out the notepad and let me figure out how to name this emotion. And let me talk to my counselor and let me investigate if I'm expressing these emotions in healthy ways or if I'm just yelling at people. And let me make sure my quality of life continues to rise. And in turn, the quality of lives of those surrounding me. There is no end. And this is the most beautiful thing that can be. And finally, you got this, man. You got this. You got this, you got this, you got this. I'm here with you. You feel that with Bryce the Third is here with you. Our community is here with you. My heart goes out to you. This is not for the faint of heart. I've learned to keep a warm heart through some cold shit, but it served me well. Better than anything I could have ever imagined. I live a life now that is in complete abundance. And in practice, I'm a wealthy man. And I'm only getting wealthier. I'm here for my kids. I have quality friends, quality relationships. Everywhere I go, I'm at home. There's peace. There's stillness. There's a desire to seek understanding. There is a want inherently to just be a good person to people, no matter how people are to me. This is the best life I could have ever asked for. And I'm okay dying in the midst of. I always got to go there. And I'm okay dying in the search of, in the midst of creating this life. Like, I don't have to die for it. But, you know, if I died today, I'd be okay with the fact that I did my best. I did my best showing up. This is the life. This is the life. And I don't give advice. I make suggestions. And this is a grand suggestion. Like, I'd love to see you over here, my guy. Becoming emotionally attuned. It does so much for a man. So that's it. I love y'all. All my men looking to grow and become more emotionally attuned. Follow me at Bryce the Third on Instagram. All of my content is aimed towards all people. It's not specifically towards men, but definitely I drop a lot of tools that would allow you to continue to tap in and stay tapped into becoming emotionally attuned. If you love what you heard today, go on Apple Podcasts and shoot me a rating and review. Let me say this about this. Apple Podcasts, I haven't seen any ratings or reviews. That's just kind of the area that we kind of are lacking in right now. And it's okay. I understand that it takes a lot to be able to go there and do that. And as a matter of fact, like with all the research that I've done, like I don't know how well it serves us. I just know that when I go to a podcast, because I'm a podcast listener, if I see that it has less than 3 stars, I think maybe less than, maybe like 4.5, I'm not listening to that shit. Beautiful thing is all of the reviews that we've gotten so far are all 5-star. Everybody has been affected in the way that I have intended to, and that is a beautiful thing. I will shed a tear on this podcast right now because of that. But if you wouldn't mind, and if you have an Apple device, go on over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a rating and review if this has done anything for you. I also shoot these podcasts and I throw them on YouTube because I'm looking to get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube and be able to monetize these videos. So if you could pop over to YouTube and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Bryce the Third, not only will you be subscribed to these podcast episodes, but you'll also be subscribed to all my music videos and whatever else I put out on that channel, including documentaries and short films. And on this specific video, go over to the YouTube comments and let me know if you are a man who is in tune with his emotions. And ladies, if you stuck around to the end, hop over to the comment section in that video because that's where the pick of the litter is. Get to snipe and go shoot your shot, baby. As always, thank you for tuning in, new listeners and my regular listeners alike. Sending nothing but love, understanding, peace, and joy your way. And we'll end the episode with this quote from Daniel Goleman. There is an old-fashioned word for the body of skills that emotional intelligence represents. Character. Let's grow in character, my friends. And whenever we decide to have some in-person conferences around the country for our emotionally intelligent community, I can't wait to see y'all face. I can't wait to see y'all face and shake y'all hand and become y'all friends because y'all who I really want to kick it with. I will catch you next time on the next episode of You Feel That with Bryce the Third.